Good morning. Today's scripture reading is from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. Again, that's Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. All the commandments that I am commanding you today, you shall be careful to do, so that you may live and increase and go in and take possession of the land which the Lord swore to give to your forefathers. And you shall remember all the way which the Lord your God has led you in the wilderness these 40 years in order to humble you, putting you to the test to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you go hungry and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, in order to make you understand that man shall not live on bread alone, but man shall live on by everything that comes out of the mouth of the Lord. Your clothing did not wear out on you, nor did your feet swell these 40 years. So you are to know in your heart that the Lord your God was disciplining you, just as a man disciplines his son. Therefore you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God to walk in his ways and to fear him. Thank you.
Good morning, Sun Valley Church of Christ. Sun Valley, where the Church of Christ meets, right here in Gilbert. We're so blessed to be here. We are glad you are here with us. It is a day the Lord has made. We should rejoice and be glad in it. We should rejoice and be glad in it because it's a day the Lord has made. That kind of covers every day that ends with Y. It's a day the Lord has made, and we should rejoice. But today's a special day in the sense of we give honor to our fathers. We have the greatest Father in heaven. And what an example he is. What a great pattern that he has showed us. That we, as believers, as followers, get to look at that example of the Father's love and glow in it. To let that light become us. To bring us into a fellowship of people that want to be like that Father. Now, Abraham is known to us as the father of our faith. And as you read in the Bible, you see a man named Abram. And that's Abraham. And you see that God has reached out to him and said, "Come with me. I'm going to make your life easy." Wrong answer. You know, he was called to a life of trial, a life of testing, but he never gave up on his father. And I want us to get a lesson from this great man as fathers. You know, there's a song, old country song, where Merle Haggard said, "Are the good times really over for good?" And we look in the world today and we see the world falling apart, and it brings me back to understanding our God, our Father. At the end of the songs, he says, the good times aren't really over for good. And that's where our faith needs to be, folks. To understand, yeah, this world is in dire straits right now, but the church is in God's hands. And with that kind of power, we can say the good times aren't really over for good. We want to teach our kids that. We want to raise our kids up in a faith that cannot be defeated. Not in a world that can't be defeated, because the world is going to be burned up as you read the Bible and see. The end of time is going to come for the world. So we're not wanting them to find victory in the world. We're wanting to find the victory in their faith, just as Abraham did. And so raising our kids is a challenge in a world that won't let us teach them the way of God. We send them off to school to be trained and taught right, and they come home with teachings completely opposite of what we want them to know. Two men were talking one time on a train home from the city. One asked the other, said, has your son gone off to college yet? And he said, yeah, he left about 2 days ago. The other man said, mine's been in there about a year, so it's almost over. In May, he's going to be an engineer. He says, what's your boy going to be when he gets out of college? He said, the rate he's going to be about 30. No. He said, no, I mean, what's he taking in college? And the man said, he's taking every penny I got. And the man said, well, is there anything that's coming good of sending your son to college at all? And he said, yeah. It's totally cured his mother of bragging on him. And I said that to say this. The world doesn't want God to be bragging on us. They are going to be in total opposition of everything God is trying to produce in us. They're going to tell us that our God is not as strong, not as faithful, not as loving as we truly know Him to be. We want to be those children that God brags on. Folks, our children are a test. We're being tested. What are we going to do with what God has given us? You mothers, hats off to you. I stand in awe of how you carry a child 9 months and deliver a baby and go through the pain and anguish that you do. But we have to remember that's God's child. That is something that God has given us. And we need to make sure that we're doing the right things with those children, that we're teaching them, leading them, and showing them the kind of people that God wants them to be, not the kind of that the world's trying to get them to be. Abraham was a man that was called with many instructions. God told him, leave your country, have children. He said, oh, my wife's barren. You just do what I tell you to do, and you're going to be fine. Abraham listened to God, put his faith in God, and made him an excellent prospect to be a father. And folks, we get that same opportunity. To God, Isaac was the only son. And even though Isaac was the only son and the son of the promise, God still put Abraham to test his faith. Used that son for that purpose. And as he was tested, Abraham revealed the value of what it means to be a faithful father. You young men especially, listen to what's being taught here. Listen to what God is showing us. He wanted a faithful father. A faithful father is someone who has great followership skills. If you leave here with nothing more than this, folks, you're leaving with the gold mine. To be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. Abraham was a good leader because he was a great follower. Jesus himself, the greatest leader that ever set foot on this earth, was a great leader because he was a great follower. Leaders that can't follow are going to lead you into the ditch. That's exactly how Jesus said that. He called it the blind leading the blind. But a leader that can't follow God is only going to lead you away from God. So we need to have great followership. A faithful father shows great faith. We got to have faith, folks. And I'm not talking about your 7-Eleven drugstore faith. I'm talking about deep down, deep-rooted, permanent faith. And Abraham had that. And then we also want to talk about fear. You know why the world's in the position it's in? Because they don't fear God. That's it. When it all boils down to, that's what it is. That fear, I had a fear of my mom. And I told my friends about that fear. They didn't see it. Well, my mom got home one day and I left real quickly and my friend didn't leave. And he came back and told me he understands why I fear my mom. You learn very quickly about fear. And we do it through faith. We do it through studies. We do it through maturing in our understanding of who God is. And when we look at this great example that we have in Abraham, I want us to turn in the Bible, Genesis chapter 22, and I want us to read the first 6 verses as we get this motor revved up. It says, now it came about after these things that God tested Abraham. Are you kidding me? God tested Abraham? I think this was the first time, wasn't it? No, he's already been testing Abraham. Folks, fathers, you're going to be tested. And just because you make it through one test, don't think it's not going to happen again. And I always tell my children and my grandchildren as we're growing up that it's kind of like going to school. You go to school, you take a test, you fail, what happens? You get retested. Folks, if we're not passing the test will keep coming until we do pass those tests. Abraham was one that was being tested all the time. And that's what, that now it came about. I know that's what our Bibles say, but you know what? This is where God's life took him. That's what that means. Now it came about. This is where being faithful to God took him. That God tested Abraham and said to Abraham, and he said, here I am. You know what that means? I am here for you, God. I am here for you. We're going to see him respond to his son in the same way. Here I am. It means I am here for you. More than just that we could say that this morning. God, here I am. No. Are we saying, God, I am here for you? This is a great test for us. Are we followers of the great example that Abraham shows us? Verse 2, he said, take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, whom you love, this son, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. Oh, I pray that we don't ever get tested in this way. And I pray for myself because I'm afraid I would fail. I pray not. But as Abraham faced this, he trusted in God. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son. And he split wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place from a distance. Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go over there, and we will worship and return to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and took in his hand the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked together. You know, God wants children that he can brag on. You know, so Satan tempts us and tries. That word, he was tested, really, in the original language when it first came into play, what we would have heard saying is, how long can you hold on? How long? How deep is your love? It's a song by the Bee Gees, right? Taking us back to the 70s. You youngsters don't get that. But this, how deep is your faith? How long are you going to hold on to what I'm saying? Abraham was tested, and look at the things that he was tested in. Followership. Folks, your followership will be tested. You know, you would say, well, I was here today. Well, good. That is a great thing. But don't rest on that. Keep pushing on, as Paul mentioned in Philippians chapter 3. Don't rest in the past. Don't rest in what you've done. Look forward to what you can do. This is the idea. Because our followership is going to be tested. And not just tested, but I'm talking about the depth. Look at the depth of loyalty. Could you imagine that? Here it is, Isaac, your son, that you know that God promised, the seed promised through. And now, this God that made the promise has told you to take your son up and basically kill him. basically, how loyal are you? How loyal is our followership? You know, we've got trials and tests every day. The testing the depth of our followership. How loyal are we to God? What can Satan, what will it take Satan to set before us before we say, well, I can't get past that one? So we say that's as deep as my loyalty is. We have a family here at Sun Valley that we take this day serious because this is the time that I can, maybe run into Rick and Rick tells me about some of the struggles he's facing and I could encourage him and strengthen him and edify him to make it pass, to make that loyalty even deeper than where it sits today. And the ones that aren't here today are missing that opportunity to have that loyalty deepened. It's Father's Day, a day to strengthen our fathers because the world needs good fathers with the depth of great loyalty to God, tested the depth of His love. How much do you love me? How deep is that love? You watch these draft choices on football and all the other sports and stuff, and you think, well, they got a good player. Well, if that's the only player they got, they in big trouble, folks. You understand what I'm saying? Because a team's power is only as strong as the depth of their lineup. And our love is being tested every day. We don't want to love the pew more than our God. Oh, I show my love. I'm in the pew every Sunday. Well, wait a minute. I hope our love is deeper than that. The depth of our love should go ready to make a sacrifice, ready to do what God has asked me to do, ready to let go of what I once held on to. This struck me this week, and I hope it raises the hair on the back of your neck like it did me. This is the first time in the Bible for the mention of love. And guess what kind of love it is? A father-son. Ooh, how deep is it? How deep is that love? The real Father and the Son. God was testing the depth of that love. He's testing the depth of leadership. Would Abraham be an example for others to follow? Would Abraham be willing to make a sacrifice that will show the great example of true followership? Although this seemed like a lot, Abraham followed. Hats off to Abraham for the great example that he has shown us as fathers to be for our children. One thing that Abraham learned was he learned to love the promiser, not the promise. And what I'm saying is, if you go back to Matthew chapter 7 and you look at the people and they said, well, didn't we do this in your name? And didn't we do this in your name? And didn't we do this in your name? And Jesus said, depart from me. I never knew you, you who practice lawlessness. They loved the promise more than they loved the promiser. And I hope that sinks in. Because Abraham knew the promise. In fact, the Hebrew writer in the 11th chapter, talking about Abraham, said he had faith that said God would raise someone from the dead. He had faith in the promiser. I mean, he could have went and said, God, this is my son. This is the seed promise. I can't do that. But he didn't. You know, those of you that study Christian music probably heard the name of Rob Frazier. A very good Christian songwriter. Christian songwriter, not calling him a Christian. I don't know if he is or not, but I'm saying the songs that he wrote. One song that he wrote says he doesn't want you better, he wants you deader. And this is why. He said in the song, dead people don't mind pain. Dead people don't get offended, so they never complain. Dead people are never concerned with personal gain. Does that sound like us? God doesn't want you better, he wants you deader. He wants you to live through his love by dying to what we once knew as love and dying to what we once knew was life, to live the life that he showed us. To be followers. Hear me out, fathers, followers of the life he already laid out for us. This message was written to a father and a grandfather who struggles each and every day. Who's here today without his wife? But he's here who trusts the promiser. Understand there's a plan. Understand my role. And live through faith. Each and every one of us will be tested somewhere down the road, if not today. The depth of our love, our loyalty, and our leadership. So we as Christian fathers, we need to be strong. We need to be people of faith. In verses 7 and 8, look at the faith that Abraham showed. In verse 7, Isaac spoke to Abraham, his father, and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, son. I'm here for you, son." Now imagine this. You're about ready to go take your son and put him on an altar and drive a knife through his neck. "I'm here for you, son." Was he lying? No. Although I'm going to be a lion pretty soon, this guy wasn't lying. He knew his God was going to take care of this. That's faith. "I'm here for you, my son." And Isaac spoke to Abraham, his father, and said, "My father." Said, "Here I am." And he said, "Behold the fire and the wood." This is Isaac. Look at it. I got the fire. I see the wood. But where's the lamb for the burnt offering? What's happening here? Something's missing. Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." So the two of them walked together. Look at this. What a powerful statement. Abraham's answer taught three marks of what saving faith is all about, folks. We will miss the boat if we don't catch these things. Faith is more than sitting in a pew. Faith is more than attending services. Faith is never turning away from where God is leading you. That's true faith. That's saving faith. We see in verse 3 about this faith that it rises early. Now, what does that mean? Well, his alarm clock went off at 5:30 and he pushed the snooze till about 7, but he rose early, right? Dave's going, "Yep, that's what I do." The idea is that he faced the challenge, folks. You know what happens? There's no delay. Folks, when we delay, we get a chance to rethink things. We start getting people's opinions, and pretty soon it makes it harder to go out there and accomplish what God has asked us to do. He didn't get other people's advice, and I'll give you an example. Back in Acts chapter 21, verse 12 and following, Paul was on his way to Jerusalem, and the people were crying, "Why are you going? Paul, don't go there. They're going to kill you." And he said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." That's Cubs version. John Madden version. He said, "Why are you hindering me from fulfilling the will of God? I know what's waiting for me, yet I must go." That is faith. He let Isaac carry his own wood. Can you imagine that? You're going to be the sacrifice, and here's the wood we're going to use. But there was reasons for that. It might have been a smaller magnitude of testing his own son. Parents, are we willing to challenge our children in their faith? I'm not saying, ambush them, but challenge them. Be there for them. You don't think Isaac was struggling with this? And could you imagine Abraham go, well, I don't know, just carry the wood and shut up, because I don't know what's going on. As God calls us to go do something, get up and get out of bed. We got to go to services. I don't know what this all about. No. He trusted in his God. And that trust showed through to Isaac. He said, I don't know what God's going to... No. He said, God's going to provide. He's going to take care of us. And Isaac's question shows us some valid points too. It shows Isaac was well schooled in the scriptures. Fathers teach your children the scriptures. Bible studies at night. Half hour before you go to bed. Sit down, open the Bible, talk, discuss. Then say good night. Take some time to build a foundation under your children. And how many of us have been asked a question by our children? And I'll be honest with you, that's part of the reason, that's part of the way God led me to Christ, is through my child asking questions. And your child asks you a question, you say, oh, I don't know. Wait till you get to Bible school Sunday, they'll tell you. We need to make sure we are the spiritual leaders that God wants us to be. And that is to have strength in our faith. Be ready to give answers for that faith. Abraham's answer showed us three things. Number one, he wanted Isaac to understand that God's will is what life is about. You're my son. I love you. But my goal in this life is to accomplish God's will. Our children need to see that in us if it's going to be in them. To train them up in the ways of the Lord. Oh, I trained mine up in the ways. I put them in a headlock and drug them to church every Sunday and slammed them down in the pew. And I said, you listen, while I went out and played video games. That's not training them up in the ways of the Lord. Let them see in you somebody who is here to accomplish God's will. Folks, rely on God to provide the answers. Teach your children that God's answers are what matters in life. Don't let them think that, the psychological powers of the world are the way to philanthropy, whatever that word is, your way through life. Philosophy is nothing but lies. God's truth is the way your children can understand life. And God will provide the things that you need in life to be secure. Number three, the value. Isaac saw the value of persevering faith. He didn't see Abraham go, oh, this is too much. Let's go home. Yeah. Mom will kill me if I don't come home with you. And I tell her I'd put you up here on the altar. No. Persevering faith. Faith that doesn't give up. Faith that doesn't give in. Faith that gives all. That's persevering faith. And that's a faith that's being tested. You think about it. Most fathers are working hard in life, and I get it. We're hard-working people. Well, what are we working hard to give them? Money? Possessions? Maybe if we work harder at making their faith established, helping them to edify and establish that faith, maybe we'll go farther than we think we can. Window salesman phoned a customer. One time he said, sir, I'm calling about those windows we put in your house. He said, those really heavy-duty ones, weather-tight, triple glazed, double paned, those really expensive windows. We put them in your house, and you said that you'd pay it over a year, no financial year, no interest, been over a year, we ain't got a payment. And he said, well, you told me they'd pay for themselves in a year. Folks, I said that to say this. You know what pays off in the long run? Faith. Faith is the victory. To overcome the world, 1 John chapter 5, our faith is what overcomes the world. Abraham, as a father, was teaching Isaac faith. True faith, great faith. Faith that would not be stopped. Faith that would be tried, but faith that would not be defeated. We could easily see that this is not an easy task, but it's a task that is accomplished through great faith. As we go on and we read through the story, we read verses 9 through 14. They came to the place of which God told him, and Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood and bound his son and Isaac and laid him on the altar and on top of the wood. Now you can see there wasn't much of a fight here. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, I'm here for you. Here I am. He said, don't stretch out your hand against the lad and do nothing to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham raised his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the place of his son. Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord, it will be provided. It is great faith. But the thing that made it great is the fear that's in it. The fear that's in that faith. Reverence is what we're talking about. Reverence made Abraham willing to try something that was beyond his own explanation, beyond his own conception. What his own mind could not conceive, he put to faith, and God credited that as what? As righteousness. You're going to be called to do things that you're going to go, there's no way I can do that. And then you're going to read Philippians 4:13 that says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You're going to say this prayer to God, and he's going to provide the strength through his word to accomplish what he's asked you to accomplish. God never asks you to accomplish anything he can't provide for. Abraham's fear was demonstrated through faith. He did what God asked him to do. Out of reverence, out of great fear of God. He understands the power of that faith. Fear understands the love of God. When we talk about fear, we're not talking about scaredy cat fear in the Bible. We're talking about great reverence, high respect. I never feared my mom. I feared her left hook. I feared that wedding ring that was on her finger, so when she gave me that backhand, it always caught me in this tooth. I didn't fear mom, I feared wrath. And I did what I did out of fear, in the sense of fear and respect and honor. I'll never forget it, and I've told the story before, where my mom told me to go out and mow the lawn. I went out and mowed the lawn, and I went back to doing my thing. And I went out and looked out, and my mom was out there in the backyard sweeping the sidewalk, clipping the hedges, trimming around the fence, and I felt about that big. And I'm still about that big. No. But what I'm saying is, it cut me to the heart. That's the kind of fear that we're talking about. Reverence. Number one, fear because I knew after she did it I was going to be in trouble. And number two, I didn't want to see my mom out doing something that I should have done. And so next time my mom told me to mow the grass, I mowed the grass, swept the sidewalk, clipped the head, the fence line, and all of it. I did it all out of fear, complete reverence for my mom. And that's the same sense we're talking about. Fear understands the love of God. It gets it. Fear understands that we can go beyond what our minds can conceive. None of this probably made sense to Abraham, but he didn't let that stop him. It understands that there's wrath involved in God's love. It gets that. It knows God desires obedience, and he punishes disobedience. We get that. Faith understands sacrifice. Abraham was called to a great task. But through faith, he understood that God was going to take care of everything he needed to be successful in God's life. I want to encourage you, fathers, today. When you teach your children success, teach them God's success, because that's what faith understands. If you teach your children to go out and make $1 million to be happy, you're not teaching them God's success. If you're teaching them to sacrifice everything to be right with God, now they have success. We want our children to have someone to follow. And if we're faithful, your children have a great example to follow, just like Abraham. See, Satan wants to use these testings to make us look bad, to make us look laughable. There was a hit-and-run victim one time just getting to his feet, and the policeman ran over to help him, right? And the man gets up, and he's pretty frantic. He says, "My mother-in-law, she just tried to run over me." And the cop said, "Well, the car hit you from behind." He says, "How could you tell it was your mother-in-law?" And he said, "I recognize that laugh anywhere." You see, the world wants to wreck our lives so they can laugh at us. And we should know that laugh. And now we fear that laugh. Ooh, I told you I'd get fear out of you. We don't want to hear that laugh. We want to be the example that we have our children to follow. The church is only as strong as our youth groups. You know that? The church is only as strong as our children. Let's strengthen them. Let's give them someone they can follow. Let's follow God at all costs so that they can follow us as we follow together. Be faithful. Let our young children see the faithfulness in us. That no matter what it is we're called to do, we're going to do it without grumbling and complaining. Because we know that God's going to provide victory for whatever it is he asked us to do. And let him see the fear in us. Not scaredy cat fear. Not fear of your secretary giving you a jap slap. Not that kind of fear, right? But fear that says, "God, I love you and I'll do anything you ask me to do." Those are the things that bring victory to our children. It's Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to you fathers. I'm so blessed to be here worshiping our Father together. I want to encourage you today, if you're here and you're not a Christian, I pray you'll make that decision today, that you'll allow God to be your Father. Not just somebody you know of, but somebody you intimately know. When the mistakes of our life break our heart, and they do, we have a God that understands that. In fact, he's willing to wash it all away through the blood of his Son as the antitype of Isaac. Carrying his own wood, Jesus carried his own cross so that you could have forgiveness of your sin. I pray if you're not baptized, you'll make that decision today to put on Christ, to be clothed with Christ, to be raised to walk in a newness of life. And that newness of life is through faith. So I want to encourage those of us that have obeyed the gospel to not let our faith dwindle. It's a beautiful day to celebrate our Father in heaven. And we celebrate our Father through true and active faith. Now, like we said about mother-in-laws that want to hit you from behind, remember that? Well, the world wants to sneak attack us and steal that faith. If there's something going on in your life that Satan's trying to use to get your faith to stumble, maybe get you to doubt God, Remember, God has given us the plan of victory, and the plan of victory is His church. If we can help you today, we will. We'll pray with you, we'll study, we'll hug, we'll laugh, we'll cry, but we'll do it together. Today, if we can help you, lead you to the waters of baptism, wash away your sin, or strengthen your foothold in the mighty body of Christ to keep that sin at bay, we'll do that if you'll let us. Please take this opportunity now to come forward as we stand and sing.